What's going on, y'all? Jason here. We are going to take up Kevin Geary's challenge to see if we can get hired by going through making a video building out a page. I got one pick from Latin Ninja here. Let's go ahead and take a look. So this one here is an old design from OpenPhone. A few things I really like about it is we're going to get to use a mask on this image. We're going to build out a component for our section intro. Might be hard to see on video here, but you can see it has this little bit of ribbon. And the cool thing is there are going to be a few different designs of ribbons. So we're going to build those into the component so a user can just select which one they want to use for each section component. So we'll go through and build this out together. Let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to be doing this with my favorite stack, which is going to be built with Etch and automatic CSS. I don't have anything started yet, just a blank site here. So let's go ahead and add in our homepage. Get this published. I'm going to go to my settings, make sure our homepage shows up here. And let's go ahead and dive in with Etch. All right, got my blank canvas. Let's go ahead and start off with that hero. The other thing I did not mention too is I do have all of my media pre-filled in here, so I have this all ready to go, so we don't have to go back and forth looking for that. So let's dive back in. All right, in the editor here, first thing I'm going to do is take a look at automatic CSS. I've not set up anything here, but I do have the palette color that I want to add in here for my primary color, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that right away here. Paste that in. So got that nice blue color. I'm going to come down to my base color, and I'm going to turn this into a not quite black, but a dark gray, and then my neutral is going to be that black. So let's go ahead and save here. Actually, one thing I do want to also use is going to be my warning color, so I'm going to turn that on here. All right, I'm going to close that out. Everything else we'll come back to as we need to. First thing I'm going to add to the page is going to be our very first section. Let me switch up my styles here. Panels don't need JS at all for this, so let's get that turned off and out of the way here. All right, let's jump into our very first section, which is going to be the very top hero part here. We're going to have two different columns here, and I think what I'm going to do, which you can't really see here, is it looks like, based on this screenshot here, is this image goes all the way to the edge of the screen, even when you go super wide. So this will be an opportunity for us to use some different CSS features and go ahead and test out the content grid from CSS, so we can extend that piece out to be the full width while everything else stays in line with our content width. So we got our hero in here, and call that hero, name this my inner, and we're just going to go ahead and build out the content. On my other screen here, I have it up on screen so that I can see what I'm building out here. First thing I'm going to go ahead and put in is going to be a flex div, going to be my content wrapper. And inside my content wrapper, I'm going to put in my heading, I'm going to put in my lead, and I'm going to put in a link for my CTA. Let's get those named here. And from there, let's go ahead and back to the inner here. I'm going to add another flex div. I'm going to change this to my media wrapper. And inside of that, we're going to go ahead and add in an image, call that media. I'm going to change this to a figure tag. All right, so we have everything we want in here. So I'm going to go ahead, right click, and bend this, get that started really quick here. All right, so where we go from here, I'm going to go ahead and put my image in just so we have that showing here. If I go to my media library, I was going to go ahead and use this picture. It's not the exact one for one here, but because I can't use this exact page because the site has since been updated since this, but I went ahead and did what I could to find similar images, similar icons to use, but that's not what matters, just the concept that we're going through here. All right, so I got my image in here. We'll go ahead and copy over our text, so we have that in here as well. Into my heading, paste that in, grab my lead, and for my CTA, we have start free trial. All right, we got that all going here. First thing I'm going to do on my button here is I'm just going to add in my button primary. Use that CSS framework from ACSS to build out some of my components here and make this easier. One thing I do note is that I want to make my button text be a little bit thicker. So let's go into our buttons, global, and I'm going to set my font weight to 700 here, make that stand out a little bit more. And let's go ahead and save and jump back in. All right, this is going to be H1, so let's go ahead and change that so it grows to what it needs to be. All right, where do we want to start here? Let's look at our content grid. So very first thing I'm going to do is on our hero is I'm going to use the recipe for content grid. So just going to be starting off with a question mark and start typing out content grid. You can see it's my second one here. I'm going to tab expand that out, and you can see it puts all of this in here for me. There's going to be some options we can change here, but for the most part, everything below here is going to be untouched from here on out. All right, let's take a look from here. Next, we're going to go into our inner, and we need to start figuring out how we're going to lay this out. So for my grid column, I want this to be content width, and from here, I'm going to go ahead and display this as grid. I'm just looking at some notes I have here over on my other screen. All right, so from here, we can start laying out everything that we want. So looking at our grid columns, I'm actually going to go ahead and take this out. So yeah, let's come back to that. So my grid column is going to be content start. So it's going to be the left-hand side here. And then on the right-hand side, we want this to go full width. So now you can see on my right-hand side here, it is going all the way to the right edge of the screen, while on the left side, it is staying within that content start width. From here, I'm going to display flex and flex direction of row, so we get everything next to each other. So now you can see that my image is going full screen. If I pop off my editor here, you can see the image is going to the full right side of the screen, no matter if I bring this in or not, while the left-hand side is keeping that content width. So let's go ahead and bring all the panels back. So we have this here. One thing I do also want to do to make sure we match is we want to center all of this down here. So let's go ahead and do that. Align items center. You can see it pulls that down into the center here. All right, so we got that going here. It's not going to be responsive yet, but we will get back to that in a little bit here. Just wanted to start just with this. So we got our inner set here. Let's look at our content wrapper. Is there anything we want to change here? If we look at our design here, you can see the image takes up a little bit extra on the right-hand side, and that our heading is going to 3 lines here, where right now we're on 2. So we need to change up our sizing a little bit here. So I think what I'm going to do is on my content wrapper here is I want to set a max inline size of, let's just try 35% for now. And we'll play around with this a little bit to see if that's going to make sense. Maybe we end up going 40%, make it a little bit bigger. We see that our heading is now down to 3 lines there. All right, that's looking pretty good on the left-hand side there. Let's go over to our, see if there's anything we want to do to the headings and anything else. I think we're looking pretty good here. Maybe one thing we could do on the heading is put our text wrap of balance on it, just to make sure that it stays balanced no matter what we end up doing here. All right, I think we're looking good there. Let's go over down to our figure tag and take a look at this next. So for this, I want to display flex this and inline size of 100%, block size 100%. Okay, just to make sure it's taking up as much of the width that it's allowed to take up. All right, now onto our media. This is going to be the fun part. We're going to play around with building out our mask here. So again, on my media here, I like to inline size everything to 100% right away, and my block size 100%. I'm going to object fit cover just to make sure my image sits properly. And one thing I want to check, sometimes out of the box ACSS puts a border radius on our image. You can see we got that going on here. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that on our media. and set that to 0. All right. Next, let's go ahead and add in our mask here. So what I want to go ahead and do is use the mask image property, and from here we're going to have to grab a URL. So what I'm going to do is go back to my media library, and you can see I pulled in a mask. I made this in Figma and copied it over. It's not perfect, but it's relatively close, and it's going to give us the same concept, even though it's not pixel perfect. Again, I'm not going off an exact Figma design, and I can't pull the exact mask from the existing site because I just have this screenshot. So we're doing what we can here. So grabbing this here, and we are going to paste that in, and you can see I start to get a little bit of the mask here. So from here we got to play around with sizing and everything. So first thing I want to do is set my mask repeat to no repeat. That just makes sure that it doesn't try and repeat itself when it has space. We can play around with the mask position, and I want to go ahead and go center right. So center is going to be up and down, and then the right is going to be left and right. So you can see it's not fully showing up here, but we'll get back into that here in a second. Mask. Next I want to do is my mask size, and I'm going to set that to contain. So now you can see it's actually cutting out that image, but it's not quite as big as we want it to be. So let's go ahead and play around with that. So I think what we're going to have to do is set a minimum block size on here to see what we can get as far as our height on everything. So minimum block size, we can just start playing with some different numbers here to see. Helps if I type that right. We can start to get that pulled over because it needs to roughly be, if I go ahead and open this in my screen here, I'm going to want this to be roughly the full hero height. If we look at our original here, you can see, and as I view this here, is going to be, that's our initial hero height or our screen size. So we want it to take up that full height, which we're not quite there, need to make a little bit bigger. You can see actually too, we have some extra padding here. I think that's just a slight bug from our content grid. I know that's something they're working on still with the existing model of 4.0 dev for ACSS. They're still getting some things ironed out along with the recipes and everything on in Etch here. So what I'm going to do is go back into my hero, and we're just going to set our inline. I think it needs to be my inline padding. Let's go ahead and open this up here and inspect. Probably going to open up on a different screen here and see if I can bring it over so you guys can see. So we're looking at our section here, and we can see that we have our padding block here and our padding inline, which is going to be our gutter. So we can probably take both of those things out. I'm going to go ahead and close this. Because we are using our content grid, I don't think we're going to need to use our gutter on this one. So padding, I'm going to go ahead and just set that to 0. And now you can see that's again going to my full height and all the way to the screen. Let's view that on the front end again. There, now you can see it's set there. I think this image needs to still be a little bit bigger yet. Again, it's not going to be perfect, but we can play around with getting it a little bit closer to where we need it to be. There, let's start with that and see how it looks. You can see on the left-hand side here, we are getting our heading back to be a little bit bigger than what we saw here. And maybe that's because our screen size is a little bit pulled in here. So even if we look here, it's looking pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that as is. I think that's pretty fitting once it's on this bigger screen. Again, we'll have that header eventually overlaying up here to fill in some space. All right. Let's look at a few other things we can do here. So perhaps one thing we can look at is what we're going to do as far as making this mobile friendly. So as you see, as I start to pull in, we start losing the top here. So we'll have to play around with where we want this to start to stack. The other thing I want to look at too is what it looks like our site width is. I'm going to say this looks fairly compact here. And let's see what our layout is. We're at 1366. I'm going to bring that in a little bit just so our content is pulled together a little bit more. Again, if we had an actual Figma design to go off of or a live site that we can pull from, we could use the exact numbers here, but I just have to wing some of it because we're just going based off a screenshot here. But let's go ahead and do that. All right. So as we start to pull in here, we can see we start to lose our image. So I think if we start with our inner here, we can decide at what height we want to stack this. And or we may even have to just change out getting rid of the mask as soon as we get this image shrinking a little too much, and it can stay on that right hand side, but just not fully using that mask because the mask isn't going to want to be super friendly as we get smaller and smaller. So I'm thinking maybe on big screens we get this. We use the mask with it going all the way to the edge. As we start to come in here, let's see where we start to lose it. Start to lose it pretty quick here. So I want to see if maybe I need to add some other. So I want to keep that going that full height the entire time. Let's see here. All right. I wonder if we're having an issue with aspect ratio. Let's see if that fixes our problem. Nope, it's still doing that. Take a look on the front end here. You can see it keeps shrinking on me and pulling away from the top. So let's try and figure out why that is here as we make that a little bit smaller. Get this back to the proper size here for you guys. All right. I think maybe what I'll do is I'll come back to that in a little bit here. Let my brain work on something else here for a second. We'll come back and sort that out. Let's see. The other thing I wanted to do was make this rating card here. So let's go ahead and get that added in as well. So I'm going to build that out in my content wrapper because it needs to sit on this left-hand side here. So let's go ahead and add in a flex div. And inside that flex div, let's take a look at what we need. So we have 2 rows here, so we're going to need at least 2 wrappers in there, and probably going to need a wrapper for the stars as well. And then we'll have a text field and a text field. So, all right, let's take a look here. We're going to add in 2 divs. And inside my div, I'm going to add another one. And I'll add some text. And then in this last div, I'll add some text. And I could probably get away without having this bottom wrapper, but I'm going to put it in just in case here. And in here, we're going to put in our icons. So I'm just going to get one in there. Let's call this rating card. Put our rating wrapper, our icon wrapper. Make this a little bit bigger here. Icon, rating text. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to add in that other one there. Let's get rid of that div. And here, I'm going to make this our, call it like the text. Doesn't have to be perfect, but we'll just go with that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and create my BEM classes here. And I think the other thing I'll end up doing is actually making this into a component. All right, so very first thing I want to do here is get everything starting to stack properly. I'm going to add in a few more icons here. They had, what was it, 5 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's flex row these so that they're next to each other, and let's work on changing out our icons. I am going to strip the color on these, and we want to use our star. I think what I probably should have done is this. Swap my star on, actually, I'm going to close that. I want this one here, because we're going to go with the half star, because they have that as well here. You can see it's not quite a full star. So we want that half one in there, and then I can duplicate this. So we have 5 of them there, all next to each other. I'm pretty happy with the spacing here. We can set our icon color to, I think it was warning we said we were going to do. And it might actually be, let's try fill. Fill works in this case. All right. And we want to make these smaller. Let's go inline size of 24 pixels. All right. Nice and small. All right. For the text, 4.8 star rating. And serving 4,000 plus businesses. All right, so for our rating wrapper, we want to go ahead and flex column or flex row that as well, so they're next to each other. We'll put in a small gap here of maybe 1 character. On my rating card, I'm going to set my gap to probably, I'm going to bring it down to 0 and see, because it looked like their gap was pretty small. .5M. All right. And then we can see that they have a nice border on the left-hand side here. So let's get some padding added in to our card here. I'm going to go padding block on the top of space XS just to get a little bit, and some padding inline of, let's do space S. I want to go back and look. Yeah, we can see the box seems to be a little bit bigger than everything that's inside there. So I'm going to stick with our XS for now. I think maybe it is a little bit big, but we can play with that in a moment. And I want to create a border, and that's going to be our inline start of, let's go 2 pix, solid, and we're going to use that warning color again. It helps if you spell it right. There we go. Let's take a look here. Looking fairly similar here. Maybe things need to be a little bit smaller. Yeah, you can see that everything altogether is smaller than our button here. Our button can probably be a little bit bigger as well. Another thing I'm noticing is their text seems to be a little bit smaller for a lot of this stuff, so let's go ahead and set our rating text to XS, and I want to do font weight of, yeah, I like that. I'm going to copy and paste that over to the other one as well. Another thing I can see here is we are not lined up on my rating wrapper. So I'm going to go align items center, and that drops that there. I don't think we need to take up our full width on our card, so I'm going to set my max inline size to max content. All right. I think I might actually go on my block size divided by 2 here. Make it a little bit smaller yet. I did that auto calc there, which is an awesome feature. Really saves some typing. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and save that. I want to look at it on the front end here. Perfect. I'm pretty happy with that. Maybe go a little bit thicker on our border. Let's change that to 3 pixels. Make it a little bit thicker. Other than that, I'm fairly happy with our sizing. I think one thing I do want to do though is change my button size here. So let's go back into ACSS, go to buttons, and let's look for our block padding. We want that to be, maybe we'll go 0.75 on that, and inline padding, maybe we'll go 1.75 on that as well. Actually, I'm going to set that to 2, make it a little bit wider yet. I think I'm pretty happy with that. Close that out. One thing I want to be careful with is not letting this text get too small here. All right. So we got that done. I'm going to go ahead and turn that into a component right away. What I think I'm going to do for now is not set any props on any of this. At some point, would probably connect this to like an options page where we can set our stars, and we can play around with some conditional logic to create our stars either being full 5 stars or being partial stars here. But because of what we have to start here, I'm just going to leave it for now. But the good thing is the fact that it's a component now, because we do have that showing up again down here. So by having it be a component, anytime we need to go back and edit it, we only have to do it in one spot. So I'm going to just go ahead and click save on that, and I think we will be good to go. All right, next, let's look at our next section here. We're going to work on this section intro as well as these cards. The section intro is going to be pretty fun on this one. I think it'll be a really good learning experience. I'm going to minimize that. Again, I'm going to come back to this hero section in a little bit, and we'll work on that again. I'm going to call this my how section. Create my inner for my cards. We're going to have 3 cards there, and we're going to have this review card underneath it as well. So I think what I'm going to do is inside my inner, I will have flux div that I'm going to make into my list. Inside of that, I'm going to put a div, going to be my list item. Then inside of there, we're going to start working on our cards. I think these are going to be fairly simple because there's only 3 items in it. I like to add in my heading and my text first and my icon at the bottom, just so semantically the heading is always coming first, and then we can just move the icon to the top using CSS. Let's see here. I think what we're going to do is call these number cards, because they have the numbering inside them where these other ones do not. I would imagine that they're going to be reused somewhere on the site, so go ahead and make them into number cards. All right, let's go ahead and bend this. First thing I'm going to do is get my icon to the top. I'm going to order -1 that, so it's back to the top here. One thing I probably should have done first is bend my entire section here, but I'll do that in a minute because you can still see we're getting our list decorations showing up. All right. think what I'm going to do is go ahead and make this into a component right away. So that way when I bend everything else, it doesn't get affected. We are also in our inner going to want our review card. So let's get that added in as a flex div. We're going to have some text. We're going to have an image and 2 more text fields. Let's take a look down below too where they reuse them to see if we need to change. Nope, it's still set up the same. I just made a little bit. It's not as wide, so we don't have to change the layout at all on this. So in here we had text. Then I'm going to add in another div. Inside our div, I'll put a figure wrapper with my image in it, and then 2 items of text. And let's name everything here. Change this to a figure. And we'll go and let's take a look here. I'm just going to put, I think, type. All right, so we have that done. I'm going to go ahead and bend this as well and create component. I'm going to save it, exit, and we can come back and bem all of this now. All right, you can see our list styling went away on our card there. And let's see here. Very first thing I think I'm going to do is create my grid here. So I like using the auto grid feature. That is a nice recipe here. I'm going to go with 3 columns on this one. And I shouldn't have to touch anything else on that for now. My list items, I always like to display flex these so that I can flex them to make sure they take up the full height of my grid. Inside my inner, I'm probably going to have to add some extra gap going back up. Yeah. So we just get some extra space in between there. All right. From here, let's take a look at what our content needs to be for. We'll do one of the cards first. So download open phone, edit component, heading. You can see this is going to need to be an H3, so it makes it a little bit smaller. And our description. There we go. Okay, let's look at our icon. We want to use download. Use this one. Strip that color. So when I start to look at all of these, it looks like it's almost a dark version of our primary color when I look at all these icons. So let's go ahead and set our color to primary dark. And again, I may need to use fill. Sometimes you gotta play around with these. Let's jump to the front end and take a look quick. All right, primary dark is not defined. Oh, again, I'm typing that wrong, which makes sense why it wasn't working. All right, there we go. Helps to type properly. All right, so we got that in there. I want to make this a little bit smaller. Again, I don't have the exact icon size that they're using for all of these, but I'm going to say these end up being a little bit bigger than these ones down here. But I think for simplicity, when I downloaded everything, I think my original sizing on those was like 64 pixels. Let's see here. Yep, all right. So I got that. Let's look at our gap. Looks like it needs to be a little bit smaller here on our card. Bring that down. You can see our text is a little bit grayed out as well. All right, there we go. I can never remember which one I need to use. Text dark muted, not light muted, because then it disappeared on us. All right, cool. So we got that done. Doesn't look like we ever have a background on our cards, but what I think I'm going to do is just set some padding on our card of space XS as well. And then next what we got to work on is going to be our numbering. I like to do this with using our card count, or an auto counter is what I should call it. So in this case, let's take a look at how we want to set that up. I always have to check on notes for how to best do that, but all right, so I think what we're gonna have to do is get out of our component here first. So I'm gonna hit save. I'm gonna exit. On my list, up above our auto grid here, I'm gonna need to create our counter reset, and we called these number cards, so we'll call this our number counter, and we want to set it to 0. So that way we can start brand new. I think what I'll do is make my 3 cards right away. So we have those right next to each other, and this should be responsive right out of the box because we used AutoGrid. All right, let's go ahead and change over our text for these as well. And I think actually this is where I need to start making some props. So let's go ahead and do that. Let me go back in, edit component. So I know I'm going to need at least 2 text properties, so we'll go the heading and description. And we'll just put some filler in here for both of these. And I'm going to put in media as well, so we can choose our icon. All right, so let's set these. We can use our target feature here to automatically put that in for us, which makes it really nice. All right, I'm gonna hit save. All right, now on my number card, we did our counter reset. So in here, let's get our numbering set up. So for this, we're gonna need a before. We're gonna do content, get our quotes in there. And in our content, we want to call our counter, which is going to be our number counter. So you can see we're starting to get a number in there. And before that, I do need to set my increments. So counter increment, we're going to set that to my number counter. And now you can see we have our 1, 2, and 3. What I do want to set is our spacing in here. So, and we need that period. All right, so we got our numbers in there and it's auto counting for us. We're gonna actually have to flex row this I like using recipes, it makes it easier. And maybe we'll go 1ch, that's going to be too much, maybe 0.5, that looks pretty good. All right, I'm happy with that. We got our numbers counting properly. I'm going to go ahead and hit save and exit. And again, let's go back and reset all of our data here. On our first one, you can see it's not changing at all. And then I'm actually going to have to think about this one. We might actually have to change over and use one of the new HTML fields in here so that we can set this link in here on this one, because you can see we already have phone number. We can port it over. And it looks like it's going to link directly to a page about that. So we'll have to look at doing that in a moment here. Let me just continue copying this over. All right, and set our icon, which is going to be talking and texting. I think I was using this one, yep. And on this one, we were looking at choose a number. And this one, we are looking at our download. And you can see those aren't working, so I have to come back and fix that here in a second. Other thing I would need to do is set my text to be text S there as well. All right, let's go back in and edit it again. I'm going to click on that description. I want to set my font size to text S again, make that a little bit smaller. And then the other thing I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to add in our HTML element here. And from here, I'm going to just copy my trying to remember how I want to do this. Let's go ahead and look at the docs. Because I can never remember because it's pretty new here. So we want that under elements and our new HTML element. All right, let's take a look at what it says here. They're self-closing. So our content is going to be put in like that. Okay. So from our description, we're just going to copy out our props actually. And in here, we're going to do there. So we got that coming back in. What I'm probably going to need to do here though is I'm going to take that and put it inside here. So that way I still get my styling. All right. So we're still styling that properly, but it's going to output our content properly on the front end. And I do need to actually fix my icon as well because I did not set that properly. So in my source here, I need to change this to props.icon. And you can see they're working now. All right. What I do want to see on the front end is on this one, we might have to also check for it doesn't look like that's getting the color properly. So I just want to see if we set it here. Yep, okay. So I'm gonna have to add a color on there as well. Go ahead and close that, come back here. And I'm just gonna copy this line and change this to color. So that way it's working on both of them. Sometimes it's depending on the icons you use. You might have to use fill or color, and sometimes they differ on you, which is unfortunate, but you gotta work around it, and this is a way to do that. All right, it's saved, we're back out. Looking back here, It looks like their heading levels are a little bit different too, so maybe we could play around with those. Do. We might need to set these to be a little bit bigger than we want. Again, it's hard because I can't go back and officially check what they used for all of their sizes. But it does look like our headings need to be a little bit bigger here and a little bit smaller on others. Let's save here and come back to that in a little bit. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and leave those where we're at there. We're going to work on a review card here next, get that designed out. So for this, we're going to need the review name, and their type of reviewer, and then we're going to need some media. So let's go reviewer name, reviewer type, review, and avatar. All right, so our review is going to be this, our review name is going to be this, our type is going to be here, and our image will be that one. All right, so we got all of those set. Let's style it up here and get that working. All right, so let's take a look here. You can see we have that light blue background, has some padding, rounded edges. All right. Background, we're going to set to primary ultra light. We're going to set our padding to, maybe we'll go medium on this. Okay. That looks pretty good. Our border radius, we're going to go radius. And our review wrapper, we need to flex row this. We're going to gap of 1ch. I think that will probably work out. We'll find out in a minute. Our image, I think we'll also set our alt to be the reviewer name, just so we have an alt automatically filling in there for us. And we're not seeing our image yet, and that's going to be a little bit of a problem. Let me see if I can just set one here. So we have one in there to use. And you can see that's not fitting how we want it to. It has just a nice small circle here. So let's work on getting our image dialed in here. All right. Let's go inline size of 50 pixels. That might even be too big yet. And we'll go border radius of radius circle and an aspect ratio of 1, object fit of cover, and we're looking pretty good there. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller yet. Let's go 40. That looks better. I'm pretty happy with that. This we need to align items center. I'm going to set a max inline size as well to be max content, just so that doesn't spill over if we don't need it to. I think the other thing, what we may need to think about is as we get smaller on this, is this going to be probably going to want to flex wrap that so that as it gets smaller, it will actually wrap. All right. I think the other thing I want to do on my actual review itself is automatically have my quotes in here. So we can do it that way. I think that'll be just fine. Let's exit and take a look here. All right, so we need to grab the actual review. We'll enter that in. I can already see a couple things we're going to have to fix here. So let's see, looking back, you can see this is a little bit lighter here, this is thicker here, and we're still using that same background color there. All right, let's edit that again. So on my review name, we're going to go font weight of 600. And here we're going to go color of text dark muted. And on our review card, we're going to go color of, let's go primary dark. See what that looks like. I think that'll work. I think I'm happy with the sizing of everything. All right, now the fun part. Let's go back to that section intro. This is going to take a little bit to go through, but it'll be fun. And I think once we get that set up, it'll be really cool to reuse it. So that's looking good there. All right. And I think what I'll end up doing probably after the fact is coming back in and dialing in my font sizes here, because I need this to be a little bit bigger, and I think just our standard text a little bit smaller, and then our small text a little bit bigger. But I'm not going to play around with that right now, because that's just going to be settings inside of ACSS to dial that in. And again, if I was pulling this directly from a developer in Figma, I would have all these numbers dialed in to know exactly what I need to use. All right, so in my section, I'm going to add another container. I want to move this to the top. And let's see here. One thing I know I'm probably going to need to do is, let's see here. So I got my container. I'm going to call this section intro. In my intro, I'm going to need my heading and my lead. In all of their examples, I did not see any that had buttons, so I'm not going to bother with a button. And I'm going to use a before to work on that nice banner that goes across. All right. So in here, where did this end up? Looks like it's hiding from me, so let's go ahead and save. Refresh the builder here. And here we are. We're back to our section intro here. Our very first one is unlimited talk and text. And our lead is across the entire US and Canada. All right, so we have that made. I think we should be able to bend this right away. And then from here, we can start having fun with it. So our heading is set to an H2, and again, I feel like that is a lot smaller than it needs to be, but we'll play with that in a little bit. As far as the heading size, I think, or sorry, the gap, I think we're going to have to make that a little bit smaller, because they pulled those in fairly close. So my intro here, let's set my gap to, let's do that, pulls it in nice. All right, so because we're going to be using a before, I'm going to have to set this to position relative. I was thinking about how to best achieve building these out, and there's going to be really two ways with our current setup. And I think I went with the probably the little trickier version, but gives me more control. So you could either just get an SVG to set up your background banner here, or in my case, I'm going to do these with linear gradients or radial gradients, and it's going to be all done in CSS. But in order to get it in the proper positioning, I'm just setting it as AB4. So let's go ahead and work on doing that. So I think it makes sense to set it off the heading because it's kind of behind the heading, and it just seems more of like it's tied to that. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and use in order to do this. So let's go ahead and get started in doing this. And I did end up playing around with this a little bit beforehand because some of those linear gradients are pretty difficult to come up with. So I worked on that a little bit to prepare for this, but let's go ahead and dive into this. So in my before, we're going to need a few things in here. So I think the very first thing we do is get our content in there, which is going to be blank. Then we're going to start working on how we want to set this up. So let's see here. First, I think maybe what I'm going to do is set a background, and we're just going to go green so that we have something to work with. So to start, position, absolute, and just start getting this built out so that we can actually see it. If I go and look at my sizing and everything, I think I measured it out and it's somewhere around 80 pixels when I measured it. So my block size, I'm going to set to 80 pixels. And if it helps if I would type right, still can't see anything, and that's okay. We're going to get there. All right, so my inline size, I'm going to want it to expand the entire screen. So what I'm going to set it to is 100 BW. And now you can see that I have it showing up here, but I don't want it to be covering everything. So let's set it to the back so it's behind. We are also wanting to offset that a little bit. So I think I'm going to go margin block start, and we did 80 pixels, so we're going to go up 40 pixels. Because if we look at this, it's about halfway up is where it ends up being. So halfway up seems about right for that. Again, we can play around with it as much as we need. All right, so we can see that our background color here is just starting off the beginning of where our text is showing here. So we need to move that to the left to make sure that it is sitting right. So I think what I'm going to do is set the inline inset. I always type that backwards. Inset inline start to 50%. Inset inline end to 50%. Margin inline start minus 50 VW. You can see it's pulling all the way over now and showing properly here, but I also want to make sure that no matter what, if we get to a super wide screen, that it goes all the way. So I like to set this end as well. So now I know it's going to go that full distance. Again, if we go look at the front end here, it's going to be showing properly. All right, so we got the positioning there, and it's going the full width like we wanted to. Next, let's look at building out our different options. So very first thing I want to do is I'm going to build the dots version. And I think maybe what will make sense is building out our props right away so that we can have the proper settings here. So let's go ahead and make this into a component just so we can get started in here. And what I'm going to create is a select field, and we're going to call this pattern. And we're going to have dots. We're going to have slash, and we're going to have a wave. Now, it is important when you're putting these in here that you have spaces around your colon here, because otherwise it's not going to properly use your items here. So I found that out the hard way when it wasn't working for me, added that space, and then it works for you. We will play around moving these in different orders so that we can see them properly, but let's go ahead and dive in. So I think what's going to make sense is that we add a prop to our section intro. So that way, or actually no, I'm going to add it to my H2. So I'm going to be data.pattern is going to equal, and I'm going to go pattern. Although I need to put my props in front of it. All right, props.pattern. So that way we can start targeting with some data attributes. So what I'm actually going to end up doing is we're going to use a lot of overlap. So instead of just going and before here, I'm actually going to put in my data attribute here. Data pattern. Okay. So that if we just leave it like this, it's going to put this styling on any data pattern style or prop. So if it's undefined, this is going to just account for anything that has that data attribute on it. So it's going to make it easy for us to go through and get that set up. All right. So we were going to go ahead and do our dots next. So for this one, data pattern equals dots. And I like to put the I afterwards just to make sure it doesn't affect if it's capitalized or not. This way, as long as it says dots, it's going to work okay. All right. So in here, we are going to override our background. And this is where we're going to get into a radial gradient. And actually, I forgot to put my before on this. That always helps. I like to build these out in kind of different lines. Radial gradient. It's going to be a circle. And we are going to go to a new line here, and I'm going to make this bigger yet so you guys have more room to see. All right, so we got the circle part. We need to start working on our colors. I'm going to go ahead and say just black to start. And I want this to take up 20%. And I want the transparency to start at 21%. So you can see I'm starting to get a circle. It's getting cut off here a little bit because I have not set a background size or background position. So from here we can do it one of two ways. We can go shorthand and just add it in after here to say 0, 0, which is going to be our position, and then however big we want our pixels to be. So in my example, I went to 6 pixels. And that might end up being a little bit too small. Let's take a look here. Back up. You can see those dots are pretty small. And right now, I think I'm actually going to leave what we have there. So we have it existing there. Now we want to play around with our colors. What I think is going to make a lot of sense is create a pattern color. And I'm going to set this to, let's go base, ultra light. So then I can come down here and set my variable to pattern color. All right, you can see that is showing up there, and maybe that ends up being a little too dark, so let's change that. I'm gonna go ahead and click save. If we go to the front end, we're probably not gonna see anything yet. Okay, we do. So we can see that's going all the way back behind our text, similar to how it does here. I'm not super happy with our text sizing here, so maybe I'll mess around with that a little bit right now. So I changed my desktop ratio, and I might need to make these a little bigger, which works out up here, makes those too big. So maybe my H3 I will manually just make smaller. Let's take a look on the front end to see what they are right now. We've got them set to 25 pixels, and I think that's a little bit smaller than what I want. They're a little bit bigger, so I'm gonna go 24 there to override it. 22, I think we'll go for. My H2 looks better now. My H1 let's override that as well. And then since we're here, let's look at our text. We're set to 18 and 16. I'm gonna bring this down to 16. And then on my S, I'm gonna override this to 12, 14. Yeah, I think 14 is pretty good. So it's a little bit smaller. All right, I'm happy with that. Let's get that out of the way. Come back into our component here. It'll just save everything so we have it. All right, so the other way we could have written out is by going background position, let me find it in the list here, and going 0, 0, as well as background size of 6 pixel, and we'll get that same thing as what we had if we take this out. So it's just another way to type that in. I'll leave it like this now so we can keep that as is. All right, so we got our dots done. Let's go ahead and go to the next one, which is going to be and 4. And this one is going to be data pattern equals slash. And again, we'll put that I in. And this is where I'm going to go ahead and just move my order here to be my default. So you can see we're back to our green because that is what is just pulling in from up here. I will eventually remove that. So in this one, we're going to do a similar thing. This one I'm going to use a background image though. And for this, we are going to do a repeating linear gradient. It's going to be a minus 45 degree. And we're going to need, let's just get some colors in here, black. And we want it to be, let's take a look at it. These things are pretty narrow, maybe 2 pixels wide, maybe 3. So let's say from 0 to 2 pixels is what our black is going to do. And then from there, we're going to go transparent from 0 to 6 pixels. All right, cool. So we got that showing up there. I'm going to take our green out of here just so it doesn't get in the way. So what we're doing here is we're repeating our 45 degree linear gradient. We're putting a black line from 0 to 2 pixels in, and then it's going to be transparent from 0 to 6 pixel. So roughly a 4 pixel gap in between each line is how that's working out to be. So again, you can see because we have that just black color in there, it's overpowering it. So if we change our black into our variable of pattern color, you can see it blends in nicely to the back now. All right, so we got that going. I think I need to actually move this a little bit. So I did margin block start. Wonder if we go and change this to inset block start minus 40, get about the same thing. Okay, cool. All right, and let's move on to our last one. This is going to be the really tricky one. It's the one I struggled the most with. Equals wave. All right, and let's go ahead and move our slash back to here and move our wave back up to here. You can see that disappears. And all right, on our wave, we're going to have to get a little bit crazier on this one. This one is going to be a background again, and it's going to consist of some conic gradients. Okay, so the very first one is going to be from minus 45 degrees again. And I have it set to 6 pixels. And then we have another conic gradient. And this one is going to be from 135 degrees. Also going to be 6 pixel. And then we're going to do a calc here. So inside my calc, I'm going to take my size, which is that 6 pixels, and I'm going to divide that by 2. Actually, I lied to you. I need to make these, let's go black and black. And then here, we're going to go with white. Let's take a look here. Need the comma in there. And then next we need to go background size. And we'll go 6 pixels. All right, let's figure out what we have going on here. So in my example I built, I actually ended up using some variables. So let's go ahead and get those in here so we can make sense of it a little bit better. I'm having a tough time typing today. All right, so this actually needs to be wave size. That is not auto wrapping for me. All right, so we got that in there. I need to look at my this should be my pattern color from earlier. This needs to be wave. Copy and paste that. And this needs to be okay. Let's see here. Just working through the CSS here to see what I'm missing. Again, this wave pattern was pretty difficult, so what I ended up doing was just finding a pattern on a different linear gradient pattern library and copied it from there and made it fit what I needed to, so I had to play around with sizing and colors a little bit. Unlike the other two, the dots and slash, the wave needs two colors for it to work. So we need to use both our actual wave or pattern color as well as like our background color, which I set to our body color. So in this case, it's that white color. Just trying to figure out what I am missing here as far as why this is not working for me. I'm going to hit save here and I want to refresh and just see what happens. Well, it looks like that might be. Nope, that didn't fix it. Thought I might have had a spelling error. Yeah, I'm not sure what I'm missing here. I wonder if I copy and paste everything over, if that's going to cause some issues. I want to see if that changes anything. And it did. All right. So I'm not sure. I'm going to undo that. So there's something going on here that I am missing. And there it is. Helps if you put the var in properly. All right. So we have our wave pattern showing up here. I apologize for that. Sometimes you run into some weird issues like that where it just doesn't want to quite work out for you. All right. So we have that there. And now we can switch between them. Where I did want to play around with this a little bit is when we set an actual background color to a section, how that's going to affect specifically this pattern, where on the other ones it's not going to. So let me move these back to the proper spots. I'm going to hit save and exit. Apparently I didn't actually set these. That would have been smart of me to do. All right, let's try that again. All right. So we got that showing up now, and we can sit and switch through these. And you can see that's working properly. And all right, let's go ahead and on our, let's go background. It's gonna be, let's go. I want to use a different color than what we were. Let's go base ultra light. We were using base, maybe we'll go neutral. So it's a little bit different now. Primary. All right, so let's play around with our item here. Maybe we need to add some Z index to make sure it's showing up properly. So we were -1 on that, and maybe what we want to do is Z index 1. So now that's coming in ahead of our background. We can see it showing up there. You can see it's going to end up looking a little funny here. So we'll have to look at how we want to play around with that based on, because I know I can target my body color here to be my, and it'll work, but we got to know that that exists in order to do that. So maybe that's something I'll come back to and look at in another pass on this. But in our case, we don't have to worry about a background color because they haven't been using those with these section intros. And maybe how I would look at this is anytime that there's going to be a background color, we just use one of the other options instead. And that way it's not getting in the way. So I'm going to stick with the dots because that was the first one we had. I'm going to click save. I'm going to take off that background color here. All right, let's look at what we need to do next. So we've built this section here. We've built the top section, which I need to come back to and finish up a little bit. These next few sections I feel like are going to be pretty quick to do. And what I want to show you guys is going to be the next, how I'm using these icon cards in multiple places with a little bit different layouts. So we did the how it works section, and next I'm going to call this my feature section. And in here, I want to add a flex div, which is going to be my list. Inside there, we got our list items. Inside there, we're going to have our icon card, which again is going to consist of a heading. But I'm going to wrap these, and I'll show you why. Heading text, and then in here I need my SVG. So just like we did earlier, I like to set my icon at the bottom, and then we can move it to the top with our order -1. All right, we got that at the top. Let's set an icon on this one. It was this phone icon. Set my heading. Missing an I in there. All right, so we got that set there. Icon card. I'm going to make this into a component. I need my text, my media, and I'm going to add in a select prop here as well. So we'll call it the heading, description, icon, and layout. So for my layout, if we go and look here, these icon layouts are the same. They're the same here, and we're relatively the same here. So I want to make a layout that works for both of these using the same component here. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to go stacked, and we're going to go inline. And you can see I forgot to put my spaces in here. All right, so let's set my heading, my description. I'm doing that wrong. Heading, description, and the icon I'll have to copy and do props.icon. I want to strip my color on that. All right, putting in that backup just in case on those as well. So next we're going to go into our actual card layout. I'm going to set my gap to be space XS. I'm going to do padding. And I'm going to leave padding off on this one. I do also want to add the same gap in here. Let's copy and paste that over. I need to set that to flex column so we get that in there. All right. Font size, text S, just like we did before. My heading needs to be an H3. All right, so we got all those set up there. What I want to do now is very similar. Data layout equals, and we're going to go inline on this one, my I. And flex direction is going to be row. And I need to set that on my actual card here. I am going to need to align items center here once we get that set properly. All right. I'm wondering if there's any last things I need to do on this one to make that work. I do believe I want to set this to max inline size, max content. All right. Let's take a look at this on the front end and play around with our stack and see if that works for us. All right, set stacked. If I go to inline, you can see it inlines it for me. Perfect. I want to go back to stacked for these. And in this example, we had, I believe it was 4 of them. Yep. Auto grid of 4. Perfect. And we got those working for us exactly how we want. We can go and set our icons for each of these. The first one was the call. Message, voicemail, and our last one, I want to set that to the globe. All right, so we got all those in there, and that is done. And then, since we want to, we come in here, add in our section intro, move that to the top up here. And we want to set that one to be a slash. We change our heading and text, and we'd be good there. We can repeat that again. You can see this next section is very similar to this one, so I'm not going to build out that one. Last one we'll probably finish up is going to be this bottom one here, which we'll get to in a minute. Okay, so let's go ahead and tackle this section now. We're going to build out this pricing card, and we already have our icon cards here that we're going to lay out in the inline and just reuse what we just did. So jumping back into the builder here, I'm going to add in a brand new section down here. And what should we call this? I think this will be our CTA section. Change that to our inner. We're going to have inside here both a content wrapper and probably our trial card split into 2. I'm going to put the content first, and then we'll use the card to move that into the first order, just so that the content comes first and makes sense as far as order goes. Typically, when we look at the DOM, we want our content first before more of the graphics and everything, especially with a call to action. I want that to show first to a viewer, but in the DOM, I'm going to have that be second. So inside of my content wrapper here, we are going to put in another flex div and a div inside that for our list. So this will be our list, which is going to be a UL, and our list item. And inside our list item is going to be our icon cards. So I got one of those in here, and this one we're going to go inline. Once I get some styles on here, we are going to be good to go. Because you see we have that styling showing there just because we don't have a class on there yet. So, all right, next is going to be our card. I think I'll call this a trial card. And again, I think this is going to get used elsewhere, so I'm going to make this into a component. So when we look at our card here, we have a price, we have the per month text, we have a button, and we're reusing our rating card that we made. So I'm going to need text, text, and button. And for this, I'm thinking it'll probably make sense to wrap the heading or the price in a div. So I'm going to go price wrapper, and we'll go text, text, go price, and I'll call this just the period because it's per month that we want there. And our price on here was $9.99. I'll probably put in the $ using a before. All right. What else do we need? We need our button in here. So in our trial card, add in our anchor link. This is going to say start free trial. And we're just going to leave the link as the hashtag for now. All right. Let's go ahead and bend this and create component. And I think what I'm actually going to do now that we have the component is in here, I'm going to add in a slot. So that way we can pull in this other component right here. All right, so I was trying to decide if I want to, or if I'm going to need to put that in a wrapper at all. I don't think I'm going to, so I'm just going to add in my slot here at the bottom, and I'm just going to label that my trial slot. All right. So on the card itself, we need to make our background into that primary ultra light. We want padding of, let's look at space M here, see how that ends up looking. And everything looks to be centered. So let's go align items center. Okay. On my button, we want to set this to button primary. And what I'm going to end up doing, because you can see when we tie into automatic CSS for our buttons, it's not going full width like it is here. So I think we're just going to change some of our values. So to do that, we're just going to target a variable. And let's see if we go button width of 100%, and that gets me there. If you're not sure what those variables are going to be, if we pop to the front end here quick and I refresh, I can come down to my button and inspect it here. And you can see all of our different variables. So right now I just targeted that button width for our inline size, and that got me where I needed to be. So that's just how you can find those if you're wanting to do that. All right, so back to this. I think we're good on our button here. Let's work back to the top and look at our price. First thing I'm going to do is just get my before in there. And I want my content to be the $. So you can see that showing up in there now. I don't want a space in there at all, so I'm going to leave that empty. What I do want to do is text align center here, and I'm going to copy that over because I want to do the same thing on my text here. All right, so on our price, we need to also make our font size. I'm going to go with the H1 font size, make that bigger. Font weight, I'm going to do heading font weight just to match that as well. I'm pretty happy with our spacing there. I think I will also grab this heading font weight, and I'm going to add it down here as well. Let's take a look. Per month, free trial. All right, on my card, I forgot to add in our radius. All right, we got that on there. I think we are looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and let's see here. I need this to be inside here. And I'm going to click save. Let's exit, take a look at this. That is looking all right. Okay, so now inside my slot, I want to go ahead and add in our rating card. Okay, so this automatically centers that, which you can see it's left aligned over here. So what I'm going to do is go back into our card and I'm going to wrap our slot in a div. And we'll add a class to it, trial card. All right, so here I'm going to go flex column. I don't think it really matters because we only have one item in here right now, so that way it stacks. I'm going to go inline size of 100%, and I'm going to go align items to start. And let's see if that gets us where we want. All right, perfect. So you can see that pulls that over to the left of there. Now you can see our card is pretty giant here, which is not going to be the case once we get our icons set up here. So I can exit here. We're good with that card for now. I need to finalize this now that we're ready to go. I'm going to bend class all of this. And inside here, I'm going to add our section intro. Pull that all the way up to the top again. We want to set that to be our wave this time. I'm not going to worry about swapping out the text here because that's pretty simple to do. We're just really focusing on the dev at this very moment. All right, let's work on our list here quick. Because it's going to be stacked vertically, I don't think we necessarily need to do a whole lot on our list. I think what I'll probably do is just display grid this, and it'll automatically get my grid gap that ACSS gives me out of the box. All right. So now for our inner, we need to figure out how we're going to align all of this properly. I think it's going to make most sense to do this as a grid. And I think we're going to want a grid 2. So I'm going to use my recipe again here. All right, perfect. We got that going on. Duplicates my grid for me so I can take that out. And so now you can see that my order is showing how I talked about. What I'm probably going to do is, because we're using the card as a component here, what I think I'm going to have to do is get a little tricky and actually target this using the nth child here. So put my nth child, and it's going to be my second. And as always, we can do order, 2 picks, solid, red, to see what we're getting, and it's not targeting the right thing here. So let's see here. All right, there we go. So we're choosing the second child inside of our wrapper here. So now you can see we're selecting the card. I can take this off, and I'm going to go order -1. Perfect. So we got that in there. Our card is looking good. Now we can build out the rest of our list here. There was 3 items. Okay. Let's take a look. You can see these are going almost the full height there, so maybe we need to play with our sizing here in our gap. On our list, let's take a look here. I think what I also want to do, as I typically do here, is display flex this and flex 1. Those just to make sure they're taking up the full distance there. All right, let me just take a look here. want to inspect something. Okay. I'm going to click save, look at the front end. Just want to see where we're at here. It's looking fairly close. Just need to swap in our icons and our different text and everything. All right. Let's go get of space M. And that's probably what we were using already. I'll make that a little bit bigger. I wonder if we go block size of 100%, that stretches it out. Perfect. Exactly what I wanted there. All right. I think we were pretty good there. We can swap in our different icons as needed for each of these cards. Let's see here. And the last one is going to be that support one. So we got those all in there. Now, what we do need to figure out is making this responsive. So what I usually like to do is start dragging it to see at what point I will need to make that smaller and where it's going to jump. Still looks pretty good all the way through here. What I'll probably do somewhere before any of that starts wrapping. So let's go 796. So if I come up to my inner where we had our grid, what I'm going to go ahead and do is add in a media query. So right click, media query 796, and I'm going to take my grid columns from up here, and I'm going to paste that in, and I'm just going to change this to greater than. So when my width is greater than 768, or 796, sorry, it stays in that wide position. And then here, you can see it breaks. What I do want to do as well is I'm actually going to take my order -1, and I'm going to place that down here as well. So now you can see my content is coming ahead of this, and when we get bigger, it jumps back to being over here. So I'm pretty happy with how that's looking. Responds nicely. My cards are responding nicely here. And same with up here. I think the last thing we want to go back and tackle is the responsiveness of our heading here, our hero. So I'm going to drop this down a little bit so we have more space. So again, as we're looking back here, we want to start to target this as soon as in this top part that image starts to drop. So that looks like it's right around 1100. So we come all the way back up to our hero. We can start to play around with this. So I think what I'm going to do is actually add a media query in here. So again, I'm going to right click media query, and at the bottom it puts that in. I'm going to change that to 1100. And what I'm going to do is take my content grid, and I'm actually going to move it inside of here. And I'm going to change this to greater than again. So anytime we're greater than that 1100, we're going to have our mask. And as soon as we get below that, we're going to switch from content grid to something a little bit different here. So that takes care of our first part here. Next, I'm going to sit just below that so we can stay there. Let's see here, what do we need to change on the inner in order to do that? I think we're going to have to add in our media query here as well and set that to 1100 as well. And I want to make it wider than. And from here, we're going to, instead of using this grid column and everything here, which I'll put inside, we'll probably want to maybe display a grid. So right now it's just stacking, and I'll probably want to have it stack like that once we get lower here, maybe to somewhere around the 700 mark, I'm guessing. we'll want that picture to drop down. So I'm going to add in another media query, and we'll just stick with the 690, and in here we can go with our grid template columns of grid 2. I think I need to actually change this to above. So we're in that grid 2 there. And eventually I want it to drop once we get under that 600 mark, which it does. Okay. Let's see what we got next. So looking at probably the content wrapper next, we're going to have to play around with our inline, max inline size there. So I'm going to add in a media query here as well. And this is where we're going to want to target probably that 1100 again. And I'm going to go wider then. I'm going to bring this down here. So only when we're above that number, it goes to that 35%. Otherwise, it just takes up 100% of what it has. And it'll be equal there, which I'm pretty happy with. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I don't think we're going to have to do anything with our heading or lead or CTA. Let's look at our figure now. And from here, really all I think what I'm wanting to do is remove the mask once we hit that 1100 mark to here. So it's just our normal image. So I'm going to add in my media query. I'm going to set that to the 1100 just like before. And everything that's part of my mask, I'm going to move inside of that. All right, and I think that'll be good. So now you can see we have, I'm going to move that border radius in there too. So outside of it, we have our border radius, got our cover, aspect ratio is good. Pretty happy with that. And then you can see it breaks. Maybe we could do that a little sooner on this, maybe closer to the 800 mark on the inner. So let's go ahead and change that. All right, you can see that is working nicely now, and we can come all the way down into our mobile size. I think that's looking pretty good. So that about covers everything I think we need to hit initially. You can see we use some components along the way to get a lot of different things working as far as different banners to use on these section intros, using our count cards, using some CSS counting so that as I continue to add cards here, if I just keep adding these, they're going to keep counting for me and I don't have to do it automatically, which is really nice. Let's go ahead and delete all those extra ones that I just made. So I really like using that. We made our icon cards down here, which we reused in a different layout here. We put a component inside of another component using a slot for our trial card. So overall, I think we worked with a handful of different things and different ways of doing things. So looking at the front end here again, all right, you can see I'm back to having a little bit of a gap here on this one. Let's see, where did I miss something? Adding inline of 0 as well. Maybe that was something I missed when we copied that over. All right, so that is fitting there. And everything is showing up nicely. And the really nice thing too is when we look at our components here, let me go ahead and inspect this, bring this back over. And I'm gonna go up here. So on that before, if I target this, if I want to change the color of our patterns here, all I have to do is go find that pattern color. And let's say I want to change this to ultralight. You can see now it's ultralight on all of them. So it's really nice that you can just target one variable in here and it's going to change the coloring on all of them. You don't have to go into each one individually. It's one thing I really like about using locally scoped variables for those. Makes it much easier to control coloring on all of that. So overall, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. Looking at the full page, I think in another video, I'll maybe finish out the last remaining things, swap in all of the text here, finish this section here, and then build our header and footer, which should be pretty straightforward, but I don't want to make this video too long here. So let's go ahead and cut it off here. We got a handful of different sections built out. Got our hero, a few sections with our section intro and different cards and layouts, and our trial card, again, reusing some other components in a different layout. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know if you have questions or critiques. I'd love to hear back from you guys. Thanks.